Jack Canfield, welcome to the show. Welcome to Become Your Own Superhero.
My pleasure, Laban. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, Jack, to say this is pretty exciting for me would be a bit of an understatement. To say I've now got the whole chicken soup for the soul combo is an even bigger understatement from an excitement point of view. The experience with your brother from another mother, Mr. Mark Victor Hansen, was an extraordinary one. And I'd love to start with a bit of a doozy, if I'm allowed to.
Sure.
To give you some context, when we did the interview with Mark, Anna, who you just met, we had just found out that we had gotten pregnant. Now, to give you some more background, Anna and I have had, with her permission, I'm okay to share this, we've had now 11 miscarriages. We only just found out, and I said to Mark, what advice would you give Anna and I to help us bring this baby into the world? And he gave some wonderful thoughts about surrounding with positive people and that kind of thing as well. Unfortunately, we lost it a few days later, and I've filled Mark in. My question for you, Jack, is what advice would you now give Anna and I to bring the next one into the world?
Well, one thing I would suggest you do is to just keep visualizing that it's possible and see the outcome, see her having a healthy child, it growing up healthy and all that. You know, it's funny that you mentioned Mark, because when my ex-wife was pregnant with my youngest son, she was concerned about having a miscarriage. And in fact, it started a little bit of dripping, if you will. And so Mark suggested we contact this Hawaiian shaman. And what he advised us to do was every day to take some envelopes and seal them up. Literally, and imagine as you were sealing these envelopes up, to imagine sealing up the womb so that this baby would stay in it and would be born healthy. And so I would just, encourage you to reach out to some people, maybe in the indigenous world where you live, to ask for some advice like that, because I think shamans actually sometimes can tune into things that we don't know. But that really helped us. I mean, Christopher was born, he's healthy, he's 30 years old now and doing very, very well. Has a few too many tattoos for my taste, but he's doing very, very well. And so that would be one piece of advice. And the other would be to not let yourself, what often happens when you've had a series of things like that is to get into, oh my God, I hope that doesn't happen. And then what happens is you're focusing on that. And then that's what you're visualizing and attracting into your life. And finally, I would, again, look to some people. There are a number of people around who sit in very high consciousness. Sometimes they're called psychics. Sometimes they're called mediums. We've done a lot of work with people like that in my life. And just to ask for guidance and to see what you might find from a higher level of what this is. And also, what's the lesson? There's some learning that always goes with this that can be valuable as well. But I would say I wouldn't give up. I would just keep working at it.
Thank you, Jack. That's something that I really hadn't explored. Certainly the not giving up thing, it's not an option to not give up. And we know that, whatever the worst case scenario might be in terms of biologically not being able to have kids, whoever we adopt are going to be the luckiest kids on the planet,
Right.
And I suppose one of the questions I had further to that response was, based on the principles of The Secret, the cult hit movie that you are part of. Every time we say the word miscarriage, I was trying to work out whether maybe we should remove that from the vernacular.
Yeah, I would just stop thinking and talking about it, because every time you do, it brings the vibration of that into your space, into her body. And so, yeah, it's like whatever, the tendency is to focus on what we don't want, because you've had it so many times. We don't want that. What you do want to focus on is having a healthy, on time, fully functional kid. And so, like, a lot of times people say, I want to stop smoking. And so their affirmation is, I'm stopping smoking. Well, you're going to be stopping forever. It's like, I'm going to Chicago. You're always going to be going, never getting there. So what you want to do is affirm something like, I'm living a totally only breathe in healthy, pure air or something like that, which would then eliminate smoking and vaping and all those kind of things. So it's tricky because our language is so habitual, but that's what's required to do that. And again, I would say, look for some people that see beyond the normal intellectual Western medical approach to all this, because often it can be something more spiritual or just psychological, or even some unhealed wound or trauma. I'm writing a book with a woman right now who we are working on helping people go back and unearth limiting childhood beliefs they took on, usually between the age of 3 and 8, that they don't even know they have. And one of the things that she always does is muscle test people and muscle test them like, I want to make a lot of money and their arms go down, meaning they're weak. Well, what is it about that? What is something in there called, it'll make my brother jealous. It'll make my dad feel bad. I'll have to manage it. People come after me for things, whatever. So we have to remove those beliefs. So there may be some negative belief that's in Anna's consciousness that she's not even aware of, that in a sense is helping with this. It could be something totally physical. It could be something from a past life. I look at all levels, but I would play with that, maybe do some muscle testing. Am I comfortable having a child? Do I want to have a child? Someone that does, kinesiology, muscle testing would be a good way to just even test that. And if it's not strong, then what is the belief or the wound or the unconscious barrier? Because sometimes there's part of us that wants something and another part that's freaked out by it. And so they're at war with each other. And usually the unconscious always wins. It's kind of one of the rules of life.
Yeah, it's so brilliant, Jack. And it's interesting you say that. We've been experimenting with some Psyche, which involves some kinesiology.
Sure.
I'm not sure whether you heard of that as well. The chiropractor Don Cannon that Mark actually recommended, who lives in Melbourne, which is where we are, has uncovered something. Anna's got her own story, and it's not for me to share. And that's something that that'll come out in her own good time, that ties in with a lot of the stuff that you're exactly mentioning there. So I think we're on the right path is the most important thing. And so I thank you, from the bottom of my heart for that. That means a tremendous amount. I know will help a lot of people watching this as well. From your own troubles, if you call them that, Jack, what are the key areas of your life that you've been struggling in recently?
Well, I don't struggle much anymore. I always say struggling is optional. I believe effort is required. Struggling is optional. The only challenge I find I have in my life right now is I've always been struggling, and there I'm using the word, but I've had this.
Sorry.
It's historical conditioning. But the challenge I have is this last 15 pounds of weight that I want to lose. So I can get down to 210 really easily, getting from 210 to 195, 190, where I really am at my best weight. I've got enough muscle that's true. I actually did some work recently and found out that I went back to a time when I got beat up in high school and I was thin. And there was this idea of now I got a lot of weight to throw around. You can't push me around kind of thing. So I need to release that. So that's one area where I've had a challenge. And other than that, I do what I want to do. I have fun. I say no when I need to. I say yes to what I want. My wife and I are happy. I'm writing 4 books at the moment. I'm making a lot of money. I would say that's mainly it. And if anything else, just getting enough sleep, because I never want to go to sleep. I'm always so into when I'm studying and writing and all of that sometimes I stay up till 1 or 2 in the morning, and then I end up getting 5.5 hours instead of 6.5 or 7. But that's about it, Laban.
Too many games of words with friends by the sounds, is it?
Well, that used to be the problem. Now it's just I'm watching too many TED Talks and things like that. Just one more. It's only 18 minutes. Come on, I'm just learning things, taking notes, and doing that.
Well, Jack, you've been very public about being a very spiritual individual and don't really identify with religion anyway. And I think whatever spiritual path you're on led you to coming on this podcast, because today is your lucky day with regards to this weight loss. Because what I didn't tell you about my health and well-being journey is that in addition to giving up all the other addictions, including sugar, and it's 50 odd days now, but I believe that I've removed the block that was causing me to relapse with that. So my only vices are running and black coffee at this point, right? But I lost 60 pounds of body fat and put on nearly 30 pounds of muscle over the course of my transformation. I'm more than happy to talk about how I did that, if you like, offline, to
Sure.
give you some ideas that you probably haven't been given yet, and will probably blow your mind if you're open to that.
Sure. Always open. Always open.
So something that really struck me, Jack, is in doing my research for this interview, I came to learn about your family, and I immediately incorrectly assumed that you would have this wondrous, perfect Brady Bunch-esque type of family. And it turns out that that's not the case, and no one's got that Brady Bunch family, as it turns out. And one particular thing that struck me was your son, Orrin Canfield.
Right.
And I know he has had struggled with addiction in the past, but you wrote a book, The 30-Day Sobriety Solution, about 5 years ago. And I was curious to know what the inspiration for that book was.
Two things. Number one, well, three really. Number one, I had a person take one of my luxury retreats. We did these week-long retreats in Hawaii for people that, they're limited to 20 people, really intense. And one of the guys was Dave Andrews. And he was doing an online sobriety coaching program. And it was really, really good. And he had said to me, I basically have been to rehab several times. I've been to AA. Nothing was working for me. And then one day I'm listening to a Tony Robbins tape in the car, and I go, why aren't they teaching this in rehab? This is really good stuff, And so he said, I started listening to all these personal development people like you, Jack, and Brian Tracy, and so forth. And he said, that's what started to work, and that's what got me sober. So he started creating a coaching program which employed all these, human potential activities. And he was having great success. I mean, huge success. And I said, how many people are you reaching a year? He said, I don't know, about 50 clients. I said, this is way too good to be limited to 50 people. You need to write a book about it. He said, well, I don't know how to write a book. And if I did, no one would know who I am. Would you write it with me? And I said, sure. Because about half of what he was teaching was my work anyway. So it was easy to do. And so that was the first inspiration, was here's this guy who wants to do it, and I want to help him do it. Secondly was my son, who had been a heroin addict. And this is called, I got divorced when he was 3, and she was crazy, and I had to get out. And even though I had a kid, and even though she was crazy in Massachusetts, you had to prove she was crazy to get custody, which I was not able to do in court. So she got to raise him. And as a result of that, he ended up getting into drugs as a way of dealing with all the pressure. And eventually got sober, joined AA. He's a sponsor. He's been sober now for, I think, about 15 years. And he wrote a book called Long Past Stopping, which is about his journey through addiction. What got him off it eventually was this thing called ibogaine, which is an African drug, I guess you can call it. It's an hallucinogenic, but it helps you recapture your whole life. You look at your whole life pattern, and you start to see where you made these decisions. And when he realized what he had done with that, he came back and he got into rehab. He became captain of his rehab program. He is sober and doing really, really well. And then my mother was an alcoholic. My grandmother was an alcoholic, and I have one other child that's an alcoholic. So the gene was there, if there is a gene. That's arguable, but definitely it showed up in our family. Skipped me, fortunately. I can drink a little wine. I'm fine. Don't drink much anymore since the pandemic. I just haven't had any desire to, because I'm not doing a lot of social events with people. But the reality is that those things together made me realize I'd seen so much pain due to alcohol and drug addiction that I wanted to make a difference.
I love it, Jack, and I wasn't able to read it in time because it's not available on Kindle over here. I would have had to order a hard copy, which wouldn't have got here in time. But from what I can tell, it's a subject that's super close to my heart, and I must say I really empathized with the challenge that you must have experienced with regards to the separation of that family, because it's something that's very close in the way that my father left my mother. And I held a lot of resentment towards both of them for a long time, until I got to a point where I was like, you know what? These are just grown-up versions of kids, and they were doing the best they could with the tools they had available. And you know what, Jack? As soon as I was able to let that go, I had the most wondrous guttural release that flowed forth from me. And one thing I would love to explore your ideas on this. What are your thoughts about trauma being stored physically in the body, specifically in the fat? of the body, which is where toxins are typically stored.
Well, I have no question that it's stored in the body. I've not heard that much about it being stored in the fat, but I agree that toxins are stored in the fat. And one of the reasons we keep fat is we eat a lot of toxic stuff, and then it has nowhere to go. So the liver can't process it fast enough, so it stores it. That's why fasting is good, or intermittent fasting, because then it gives time I call it to empty out the banker's boxes, and then this fat can go away. But it's definitely stored in the body. We can see that all the time. And when people release it, you see the release in the body that happens as well. And I think the thing that's really important is that nobody realizes they're carrying around, well, not everybody, very few people realize they're carrying all this around in their body. The molecules of emotion, as one person calls them, and that there's work for all of us to do. And most people don't know that. Our school system doesn't teach us that. Most people don't go into therapy. They think it's for weak people. They don't think they can afford it, whatever it might be. So it requires things like podcasts like yours, like workshops I do, online courses. One thing I do twice a year is I lead a hour-long free seminar. It's a webinar. Anyone can sign up. I'll often have 2,000 people on it, and I take them through a process of going back into their childhood, identifying a limiting belief and releasing it and replacing it with something positive. And we get out of 2,000 people, 1,990 have these life-changing experiences. And they had no idea when we started the process what they were going to get in touch with. For example, one woman who's an amazing skier, and she should be winning all her competitions, wasn't. And when she'd ski alone, she was great. When she'd compete, not so well. And when we did this process with her, what she got in touch with, went back to when she was about 11. And there she was in the kitchen with her mom. And she said, "Mom, how come you never display my trophies, my medals, and my ribbons like other mothers do?" And she said, "Well, whenever you win, it makes your brothers feel bad." And so she decided at a young age, when I win, it makes people I care about feel bad. So she basically was uncomfortable winning. And so she would sabotage herself. And once she realized that and realized that she's not responsible for how other people feel and that she can win and they can still be okay, she started winning medals and trophies, and she possibly will be in the next Olympics. So the reality is we've all got them. Most of us don't know it. And we have to go back in there and find it and overcome it and release it.
I love that, Jack. And because it's so close to my heart. Because my parents split up when I was 3.5, and I really couldn't remember anything until about the age of 15. And since I've gone through this healing journey, my memory has with a combination of eating right and being sober, and it's all flooding back to me. And when I wrote my book, it generated even more good and not so great memories that I've been able to process and have really amazing success with. And the point regarding the fat storing the trauma, this is only theory, I haven't spoken to anyone about this, is that I inexplicably started running ultra marathon distances in a period of 5 months. And when I hit that point where I'd maybe depleted my glycogen levels and I was burning the fat, I would burst into tears of joy. And it happened for about the first 1.5 to 2 years. And I was curious to know if you've ever heard anything like this before.
Well, I've heard about people having what they call runner's high, where when you run and, but there was a psychiatrist, I don't remember his name. He wrote a book. It was all the big rage about, 30 years ago, where he would actually take his clients running. And as they would run, he would do therapy with them. And he said it was 10 times more powerful than when he would just sit in his office. So I think there's something to what you're saying, that it starts to move things that have been static. The word emotion means energy, in motion, and emotions are supposed to move through you. And when we want to shut down our feelings because they're too uncomfortable, we don't move. We don't breathe as deeply. We sit still, we freeze, etc. And so I think that totally makes sense. Again, I don't know about the fat part, but I do know the holding on and the lack of movement and the lack of allowing things to move, and the running starts to get all that moving. That all kind of makes sense to me.
Well, one of the ketone bodies in when you're burning fat is alpha-hydroxybutyrate. And we convert a percentage of that, don't quote me on this, I'm not a scientist, into gamma hydroxybutyrate. GHB, which is known as fantasy, which is the recreational drug that's very popular. It's also known as the date rape drug, I think, because of how stupefying it has when people are roofied with it, right?
Mhm.
And I've spoken to Nobel Prize winning Professor Barry Marshall, who's a gastroenterologist. I mean, put him on the spot. He wasn't able to explain it. He had some ideas, and a few other people. And I just wonder whether the combination of all the mindfulness stuff that I'm doing, all the self-development stuff that I'm doing, the physical state that I've got myself into has created this this synergistic being in my body, and it's rewarding me with this wonderful healing process. It's so spiritual, and I feel so connected to the universe, Jack. I can't really explain it, and I'd love someone to be able to do it.
Well, I'm probably not that guy today, but I would encourage you to keep looking. And also, stop saying I'm not a scientist, but everyone thinks like somehow you have to have some degree to be able to read research and quote it back again. So if that's the research and those are the letters of the molecules and they do that, what they do, then you're as legitimately talking about that as anyone who has a degree from Stanford or the University of, whatever in Australia,
I will heed that, and I will take that on board, and I'm gonna say the most positive things I can possibly say. I'm not even going to use the word negative nay. I wonder if that works for the universe.
Well, your next book can become your own self-declared scientist. How's that?
I think with some of the stuff that I spout, Jack, I think that's already been declared. Jack, I just read my first children's book in, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years since I read one to my niece, and I loved it. And it's called I Can, and it's by you and Miriam Laundrie. How the heck did that come about?
Well, I run the seminars. I didn't do it during COVID, but before that, I think 15 years in a row, called the Breakthrough to Success seminar. And it's a 7-day training. And she came to one a couple of years ago. And we do this exercise called the I can't, I won't exercise. So I have people put they sit with a partner, and then they have to say sentences that start with I can't that feel true in their life. I can't find time to answer all my emails. I can't lose weight. I can't stop smoking. I can't keep my room clean, whatever. They go back and forth. And then I have them say the same sentences again, but instead change it to I won't. So instead of I won't keep my room, I can't keep my room, I won't keep my room clean. Instead of I can't lose weight, I won't lose weight. Instead of I can't stop smoking, I won't. And I say, what was the difference? And everyone goes, oh, the second one felt more honest. I feel more powerful, whatever. So the idea is I can't weakens you. As I said, we could put our hand out and we say, I can't, arm goes down. Say, I can, arm stays strong. So what happens is she wanted to go home and teach that to her children. And she said, I couldn't just give them a lecture. Now, these are young kids. I needed to create a story. So she began to create this story about this girl who's in the 2nd grade and has to give a report. It has to be the student of the day and show and tell, that kind of thing. And she says, I can't do it. I can't speak in front of the class. And so she writes a fake note to her teacher, Molly is sick today. She can't speak. And so yeah. So then the teacher said, oh, that's so bad. I guess you won't be able to talk to the kids today. And then Molly realized she just boxed herself in. She can't talk on the playground. So now she's got to pretend she can't talk. So she's observing all the other kids and she sees them going, I can't swing on the monkey bars alone. I can't do a cartwheel. I can't tie my shoes. She said, wow, this I can't is endemic. So she goes home at night. She has an idea. And so she makes a list of all the things she can't do. And then she sees the teacher using this paper shredder. And she says, what if we were to shred this list of I can'ts? And so for her thing in front of the class, she decorates the paper shredder as this big monster with a huge mouth where the paper goes in, has everyone in class write down something they can't do. And one of the time they have to come up and shred it and then replace it with I can. And so that was the way she kind of taught the children of her own kids how to replace I can't with I can. And then we also teach what we call the I can't funeral, where you have a funeral where you either bury the I can'ts, have a whole class go out in the yard and dig up a area and put the I can'ts in a shoebox and bury it and have a eulogy, here lies I can't, who was heard in the halls of Congress and so forth and so on. But he's survived by his cousins, I can and I will, and you have juice, little juice packets and all this kind of stuff. And so it's a ritual. You can burn it, you can shred it, you can do whatever, but the kids really get it. And so we decided to turn that into a book. That's how the book came about. It's done very, very well, actually.
Well, I just left a review, and because it was brilliant, and it needs to be in every kindergarten and primary school, because the power of this self-talk. I'm sure you've experienced this. Once I became aware of my own self-talk, Jack, I now am hyper vigilant with how other people talk about themselves, and it's to the point now where I can't handle it for too long. What's your experience with that?
I'm always interrupting people in their self-talk because I can't handle it either. I hope people say, well, I'm just a teacher. Well, no, you're not just a teacher. You're a teacher. I can't do this. I wish I were able to do that. If I had more money, I'd do that, whatever. And, we talk to ourselves, it's been measured between 50 and 60,000 thoughts a day. And the average person in the developed countries, it's about 50 to 75% negative. And that's awful when you think about it. And it stops us. It creates depression. It creates inactivity. It creates people not moving forward in life, low self-esteem, low self-confidence, etc. So I think, as you said, mindfulness, the first step to changing anything is awareness and then choice. So if I'm not aware I'm doing it, I'm not going to change it. But if I'm aware of it, because people like you and I talk about it on podcasts, we write books about it, you confront people when they do it. In my company, if anyone says anything negative about themselves, makes an excuse, uses the word I can't, judges somebody, whatever, it's $2 fine right on the spot. So it's the idea is to heighten their awareness that there's a cost. Not we're like trying to punish them, but to show them this is costing you in your life. And so we don't have a swear jar in our home. We have a negative thoughts jar. When the kids were growing up, they'd have to put a quarter in there if they had a negative thought out loud. Again, just to heighten their awareness. So, I'd hear kids say to their friends, like, don't say the word can around my dad, it'll cost you.
Oh man, I wish I had that swear jar around a few years ago. I'd be a bloody multi-millionaire.
There you go.
Jack, one thing that comes up with a lot of people that I talk about and interrupt, with their negative self-talk is they want help with how to deal with a narcissist or narcissistic behavior. Do you have any advice?
Well, narcissists in general have very low self-esteem, and they want everyone to love them, acknowledge that they're okay, because they don't feel that way inside themselves. I think that in general, I have not found a lot of success for the average person to be able to change a narcissist. It's more like, how do you protect yourself from a narcissist? My wife had a narcissistic mother, and she was a famous actress, not in Hollywood, but in her San Diego. She used to win awards. She was always cast in the local plays. Her ashes are buried at the Playhouse, where she played all her plays. She was a model. She was attractive, but she was a narcissist. And so everything the kids did was wrong, was never good enough. And they were always supposed to bow down to her. And so it had a huge effect on my wife. I think my wife would have been a great actress, but she was so turned off by her mother that she wasn't going to do anything her mother did, so it's kind of abreaction, we call it, but I think in general, I think Donald Trump, our president, was a narcissist, and, all that adulation that he needed, had to be on the road all the time, people telling him how good he was, etc. Still going on. I didn't lose the election. He's still doing that going on because he can't believe it. He was a loser. It's incomprehensible to him. So I think in general, they can be dangerous, and just protect yourself.
Great advice. And don't ever be afraid to cut these people out of your life as well.
Exactly.
What are your thoughts on keeping people at arm's length?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. There's a friend of mine wrote a book called Who's in Your Room? And the idea is that anyone that gets in your room kind of stays in your room. So don't let those people into your room. Imagine you have a doorkeeper, that every your life is a room. And, you can kick people out for sure. There was about 5-year period where I would not take my mother's phone calls because she was drinking too much. She was depressive. She hated men. I would happen to be one, even though I was her son. And I just told my secretary, I'm not here. So then she eventually got sober. She became more trainable, if you will, and she got off a lot of stuff. But I didn't need to be brought down, by that. And you can reach a point where you can be around negative people and not let them affect you. But that's like being a lighthouse in the darkness. Most people don't have that much self-growth to be able to do that. So in general, you've probably heard Jim Rohn's quote, the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So be really conscious about who you spend time with, because you are going to become like them. We tell our kids, don't hang out with those kids because they're a bad influence. It doesn't stop when you're 35 years old. People are a bad influence, so you want to be around people that are positive, encouraging, goal seeking, spiritual, their lives are working, they're happy. Otherwise, you're going to get caught up in that energy sphere. So if you have to be around them, what I teach people is imagine yourself surrounded by an eggshell of white light, so it's not coming in. And then when you get home, you can do a little energy exercise where you imagine all these strands between you and you cut them with scissors. You break that bond, you send them away, send them light, send yourself light, pull all your energy back in. So something I learned from a shaman, by the way, and not be affected by it. But it's challenging. The world's full of a lot of negative people. And that means for me, not listening to the news, not listening to negative people, not reading books that aren't of a high vibration, not watching television shows that are going to be nothing but violence. I mean, a little bit of violence in a right James Bond movie can be fun, but if that's all it is, it's just a downer,
But of course.
Well done.
Thank you. The reason I laughed was the similarities between me and my mum, whose relationship has dramatically improved once I was able to let a lot of that go. It was more of a reactionary chuckle because of the many years of really for a year at a time, maybe on a birthday or Christmas, there might be a text message or whatever.
Right.
But I'm happy to announce it's in a much better place now. This next question is super important for our audience and maybe more important for me. What does Oprah smell like?
That's a good question. I mean, she has a unique odor, if you will. I hope this doesn't sound racist, but Black people have a different smell than white people in general. And she has that. It's not offensive in any way, but it's definitely unique. And the few times I've hugged her, she'll often have a perfume on that is distinctive. I don't know which one it is, but I just like hugging Oprah. She's really good to hug. She's a good hugger.
Well, she looks like a good hugger, and I mean, you are a great hugger from what I can tell as well. And the reason I asked that was in jest, but also, do you feel or do you think that people like Oprah or successful people that are happy, or do you reckon they smell differently, or I don't know if you understand what I'm asking here.
Well, I hear there's a phrase called the sweet smell of success. That's a phrase we have in our language. I don't know that when I've hugged Oprah or any other multimillionaires and billionaires that I've hugged, which are quite a few, that I would say they smell like success. I think everyone has a unique smell based on what soaps they use, what perfumes, what hair shampoo, etc. But there's an aura of success. I mean, Oprah has tremendous self-confidence, tremendous presence. It's clear she's commanding the space she's in, and you're entering into it, and she's inviting you in a very generous way. I remember when I did my Super Soul Sunday, I go over to her estate, which is in Montecito. It's about 40 acres of beautifully manicured estate, because she's worth $3 billion. She can do that. And you get on a golf cart from the room where you've been done your makeup and stuff, and you go down around the edge of the estate to either her tea house, which is a stone house, or her under the trees, if you've ever seen those interviews. And she says, "Welcome to my neighborhood." It was just like some neighborhood you got over, and then we hit it off. I love her. She's fabulous.
Yeah, what a wonderful positive influence she's had on the world. And something that really was interesting to me is that she said when you asked her about how would you feel if Stedman forgot her birthday, she said that she wouldn't mind.
Yeah, that was funny, because it's a thing I often do to get people to point out that it's not what happens, it's your belief about it that makes you feel bad. Because normally what someone says, I'd feel bad, and I say, why? And they say, well, that must mean he doesn't love me. And then I'll say, well, is it possible you could think the thought, someone who loves me forgot my birthday? How would you feel then? And I was setting myself up for that, and she totally blew me out of the water because I couldn't go there. But I believe it's true. Her feel good is not dependent on anyone else's behavior. It's really clear that's true for her. And so that's why that happened in that interview. It was really funny. But yeah, she's definitely in charge of her own experience.
Brilliant. Jack, what lights your soul on fire?
Well, number one, my wife. She could have been on Saturday Night Live. She's a very funny person.
Is this
So I
Inga?
just
Inga?
Inga, yeah, I get to see her every day. We play ping pong about 3-4 times a week. That's really fun. I think music. I've got probably I've got so many things in my Apple Music file. It's probably enough for 7 people. If I listened to every song once before I died, I'd probably have to live to 108 right now. But I love music, so I'm always downloading new music. I love comedy. So I spend at least 15 minutes a day watching some comedy thing on, my computer. What else lights my fire? People who are committed to excellence, whether it's like watching the NBA playoffs or someone like you who's committed your life to excellence, talking to you. People that are fun. I love fun. I'm irreverent. I collect jokes, and most of them are not quotable and things like this. People send me cartoons, again, most of which I can never use in my presentations. But the point is, I love it. It's really, really fun to laugh, so those are the things. And I think people that are solving problems in the world, the idea that we can solve global warming, that we can get to the point where we don't have to take cancer anymore. We can get to Mars if we want to. If Elon Musk wants to go to Mars, well, why not?
Fantastic. Well, my very first interview, Jack, was Diane McGrath, Dr. Diane McGrath, who's a Mars One astronaut candidate, and she's been shortlisted down to the last 25 to go to Mars one way. So that's pretty exciting. Where do people find you, Jack, and what kind of people should want to connect with you?
Well, I think if there's anything you want more of in your life, like happiness, joy, money, fulfillment, whatever, if you're someone who wants to be someone who becomes a coach or a trainer, or you are one and you want to add what I do, I teach a train the trainer course where we teach people how to do live interactive seminars, but also how to do one-on-one coaching using the success principles that are in my book, The Success Principles. And there's also personal development classes there. So you just go to jackcanfield.com. There's all kind of free downloads as well. One thing, if you go to jackcanfield.com/transformation, you can get a free 10-day course. It'll come to you as a 3 to 5 minute video every day for 10 days. And you watch it. It talks about a success principle. You then apply that during the day, give you some tips on how to do that, so it Velcros into your system. And I'll just share a real quick story. A guy named Chris Jarvis sent me a podcast he did, was a blog he wrote rather, about a year ago. And it said how a free 10-day course made me an additional $1 million last year. And he literally had started that course twice. It's not even a course. It's just started to listen to it and stopped because he was busy. And then he broke his leg and he had to do it because he had nothing else to do. So he listened to all 10 things in a row. And he said, doing what I learned in that 10 days made me $1 million extra last year. So I share that to tell you how powerful that can be. And it's free. So please come and get that and get involved. And if you get on our mailing list, I mentioned earlier that I do this call twice a year where we'll deep dive into your limiting beliefs and remove one on each call, and it lets you be more successful in your life.
Well, for one reason or another, I don't know whether I've just fluked this, but a number of people that I've bumped into had never heard of you. They'd never heard of Mark. They'd never heard of Zig Ziglar. They never heard of Les Brown. And many of them had never heard of Brene Brown as well, which blew my mind. So if you are skeptical about any of the stuff that we've talked about today, you need to sign up and get access to this, because this will change your life forever. The privilege that we have to have this great man in our presence is beyond any kind of abundance that I have been wishing for a long time. Get on board. Jack, do you have any concluding thoughts for our audience today?
Yeah, I always like to end with this. You have everything you need to accomplish anything you want. Now, you may have to learn some new skills. You may have to learn some new concepts. You may need to learn how to partner up with some people. But if there's any dream you have the capacity to fulfill it. I believe, and it's been my experience working with hundreds of thousands of people all around the world. I've spoken in 50 countries. The reality is that you're never allowed to have a dream if you don't have the capacity to make it come true. So whatever dream is in there, don't disbelieve it. Believe it's possible. Do whatever it takes to fulfill it. And like Laban's saying, there are hundreds of people like myself and Laban and Mark Victor Hansen and Lisa Nichols and Tony Robbins and Oprah Winfrey. We're all committed to having you do that. So once you get into this world, you'll discover There are hundreds of us. We all have great ideas for you. And then you become kind of an addict to the good things, what we call positive addictions, to joy and to happiness and to success and to fulfillment and to service and contribution. All that's possible, and your life will magically transform.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jack Canfield.
My pleasure. Thank you.